I did write down the run sheet again, so I do have the questions. So
work.
it will not be free fall, I promise.
I think that's fine.
Look at us being so organised.
I don't feel like we have to be a mystique, you know? We can be like, we write down our questions beforehand. I think that's okay.
I mean, crucially, one of our identifying, qualities is that we can read and write. It's pretty
True.
Speak for yourself.
Well,
But we just don't seem to always remember what we've written down.
Read.
Amy And is a podcast that explores all kinds of bookish things, and that can include some pretty adult content. So please be aware that some of this content will be not safe for work or for young ears, and be careful who's listening when you are. Welcome back to Amy And. I'm Amy Matthews, and I'm here today with Millie Heffernan.
That's me.
Peyton Hogan.
Hello.
And Justina Ashman.
Hi.
And we would like to begin, as always, by acknowledging we're meeting on Kaurna land today, and to recognise that the Kaurna people of the Adelaide Plains and Titania, Adelaide, have been the custodians of the land, sea and skies for time immemorial, and we'd like to pay our respects to their elders past and present, and to acknowledge the rich tradition of storytelling that this country holds. So welcome everyone. Today we're talking about YA this month, which I'm kind of excited by, because again, it's like one of those genres that is not my research specialty, but I have grown up reading a lot of it. I realise when I look at lists of books.
Well, for people who don't know, what does YA stand for?
Yeah, young adult. Thanks, Millie.
I feel like most people would know that.
Yeah, but no, there probably is.
You never
someone who
know, I
doesn't.
guess.
That is probably
it
true.
wasn't always called YA, so
Yeah.
there's that.
No, we're going to dive into that a bit. I want to remind everyone that our book of the month this month is Olivia De Zilva's Eggshell. So go out and nab your copy or borrow a copy and start reading, because we'll be talking about that at the end of the month in our live book club. But yeah, let's talk about YA. So first of all, I was going to dive into terminology, because it seems like there's a proliferation of terminology for this now, because we have middle grade, teen fiction, young adult, and new adult. And there's probably more than that, is there? There probably is. Children's, I guess children's where it blurs into children's, junior fiction. So what the hell is YA?
Well,
Yeah, who wants to take it?
To repeat what I think we've said before, potentially on the podcast, or just at least in our conversations when we were thinking about what to talk about this episode, it is, I think, broadly a marketing category. But I was thinking about this the other night. I think the difference between a marketing category and genre becomes blurred when you're like in a publishing context that is capitalist, right? So like if a publisher is acquiring books to market to teenagers or parents of teenagers or schools as YA fiction, then the marketing category becomes a part of the way that you think about what books you acquire, and then thus what books get picked up. Yep. And I do think the difference to me is the intention of writing specifically for a teen readership. Yep. Whereas I don't necessarily think that other genres are necessarily defined by who the readership is.
That's really interesting.
That's true.
But then there's quite a flattening, right? Like that all young people are the same.
Yeah.
Yes.
Which you don't do with adult readerships.
But that's why it's weird, and I think people struggle to think of it as a genre, and it might not be a genre, in that in YA you can have, even from the same author, like fantasy, sci-fi, contemporary, horror, thriller, crime, like all of it, romance. It all exists under the same, on the same bookshelf, actually, which is the actual thing, the same bookshelf in the bookstore.
And when one of those genres is particularly popular, thinking of marketing again, then all of YA becomes that. Like,
Yes,
at the
like it
moment,
did with
it's
YA
a lot of
dystopia.
romance. Yeah.
Right,
yeah,
and now it's all
dystopia.
romance. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I find YA as a category confusing And then also not. Like, I know who's reading it, and I understand what kind of books are included in it. But I just hate that young adult was the terminology that they used for it, because technically a young adult would be anyone 18 to, like, I don't know.
Which is what new adult is? Is that what new adult is?
I think so, like, new adult seems to be the content is a bit more mature.
Yeah.
And so I think it's more clear to me when I think the term new adult, it makes sense. The people reading it are also the people who are in those books, et cetera, et cetera.
But then you have like crossover, like they talk a lot about aiming for a crossover audience. So I'm going to pick a book like, I don't know, The Hunger Games, which is something that is read by all ages, right? And so, yeah, I find the whole idea of YA a bit confusing. And my approach to it now at my age is more, I have to buy a present for my niece. She loves reading. Now, we just did this 2 weeks ago and she turned 10 and it was like, but she reads way above her age bracket, right? She's a really advanced reader. So it's like you go into the bookstore and you're like, I need to get something for a 10-year-old who likes, you know, much more advanced reading, but what content am I looking for? That's where it's helpful to kind of go, okay, I'm going to go to the young adult section.
Yeah.
But nowadays, there's so much adult content in the young adult section.
Yes, and there's so many books talking about marketing again that are marketed in the wrong place, in the wrong genre, and have been put in YA when we know for a fact that they are not YA. Just vibes, just on vibes alone.
You see this a lot with fantasy, where you're like, is this YA fantasy or is the author a woman?
Yes.
Like,
Yeah. Yeah,
Well, we ended up getting her a couple of adult fantasy books that we'd read because we knew there wasn't like excessive violence or sex or that are shelved in adult. But I was like, they're way tamer than some of the things in the YA section.
Yeah. But you do get, I mean, speaking of it as marketing, I think this was a conversation I think that was happening several years ago about adults who buy and read, who are large buyers and readers of YA for themselves, not for family members or for whoever. And I used to be one of those adults. I still am. I just haven't, I'm still a buyer of YA. It's been a long time since I've actually read a YA, excepting, of course, Olivia's book, which we're going to talk about later this month. But there was a conversation there of like, is that changing the way people write these books because they're writing to an audience who are adults reading YA? Like, is that changing the content at all?
And I think that kind of makes sense to me that it's young adult and adults are reading it. But like, I work in a bookstore and at some point they completely got rid of the teen fiction section. So teenagers, it doesn't exist in our stores.
Because when I was growing up, like teen fiction was very different to YA, right? Like Sweet Valley High was teen fiction.
I was about to say, even when I was a teen and below, we didn't really have young adult yet. That wasn't really a marketing term yet. We were reading, it was teen fiction. Again, we were reading adult books and we were reading all sorts of things. But we didn't really have young adult until sort of I was in my 20s. So then I was reading young adult in my 20s because it was still applicable. Like a lot of the themes and the way the characters were written and the age that they felt still felt very applicable to me even as a 20-plus-year-old.
Yeah, and then that boundary is really slippery. I remember one of my favourite YA books when I was a teenager was The Messenger by Markus, which is right there in that stack, which is about someone who is, I think he's 18 or 19, he's finished high school, and it was really different to the other YA I had read, which had usually been high school aged characters. But still shelved as YA, still marketed as YA, even though it could very comfortably, I think, sit in a general fiction shelf as well.
I read it as a teenager because Markus Zusak came to my high school to do a little writing workshop thing. And that was after The Book Thief had come out. So I think he was doing like a tour based on The Book Thief. But I really, The Book Thief's a great book. Again, another YA book, but very serious, very dark themes. But The Messenger is my favorite of his because, it really struck me as a teenager. But I read that as a teenager, but again, very heavy themes in those books.
It's so interesting because in the bookstore I work at, those two books have always been in the adult fiction section.
That's really interesting.
Yeah.
And I think part of that is because, again, part of that is trying to sell the books to adults.
Yeah.
And trying to get them, because they have that crossover potential, You know, sometimes you'll just find them shelved in both the teen, like YA section.
It's
and
interesting. Sometimes they do different covers too, right? For
Yes.
the YA
I
readers.
almost
and
can't
the
read
adult.
The Book Thief now as a 33-year-old because when I read it the first time, I would have been a teenager or like late teens. I don't know, there was still kind of like a bit of a glaze over the eyes. And if I sat down to read it now, I don't know that I could get through it, like just upsettingly, you know? It's so upsetting.
But I mean, this is the thing that like something being YA or even younger or even like middle grade or children's doesn't mean that it can't or doesn't have dark content or like violence or, you know,
There's
upsetting themes.
Junior fiction series I haven't read. I'm going to guess that Abby has. Warriors? Yeah.
A nod from Abby off
We're
screen.
looking
really
at our
embarrassed.
producer there.
But I've...
We need to set up another camera to the
Yeah,
Abby
just so you
reaction.
Yeah.
Abby, a camera cam, yeah.
Abby cam, yeah. Live Abby
Someone-
reaction.
Yeah. Another friend of mine has read them and has actually spoken to me about so much of the stuff that's in them, and it's so dark. I could be right. I'm pretty sure one of the cats actually has like an abortion or something. Yeah. Lots of violence, all that kind of stuff. Kids love it. They're
Yeah,
fine.
I mean,
with it.
Tomorrow When the War Began was
Yeah.
like the series to read when I was a teenager.
And even actually a series of unfortunate events. Like it is,
True.
they are, I would say, like very funny books, very
Yeah.
witty books.
But lots of unfortunate events.
yeah. And kids love it. I love those
But you
books.
think
when I
about
was a
Roald
kid.
Dahl even as a kid's
Yeah.
book. That was quite dark.
Oh, yeah.
And we were mentioning off camera, which I was going to bring up later, but I'm going to move it up the list, was S.E. Hinton writing. Like, so I think she was 17 when she published The Outsiders. And that book's quite dark. Like, it's doing a lot with class and poverty and heartbreak and violence and bullying, and there's death, there's people get hurt. Like, it's pretty intense.
The reality is that these are things that teenagers do encounter in life. So it feels almost condescending to say that it shouldn't be in the fiction that they read.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But there are ways that you can write those themes that will be, I guess, maybe less confronting isn't the right term, but in a way that a younger person, especially earlier teens, can read it and process that information in a healthy way, as opposed to coming across it in an adult book where you don't have to take those kind of cautions. And a little kid reads that and they're like, I have no way to deal with this information.
Do you think part of it is about that word processing that you used?
Yeah.
That with adult fiction, sometimes there's a voyeuristic or fetishistic kind of revelry in violence or sex.
I do think.
Whereas with maybe once we move into young adult or new adult, that there's more of a conscious attempt to process what's happening.
Yeah.
There's also, I feel bad that I don't remember which author I heard say this. I want to say it was Suzanne Collins talking about the Hunger Games, but it genuinely could have been any YA author of YA dystopia back when that was the genre, the popular subgenre of YA. I remember them talking about the difference between writing dystopian for teens versus an adult dystopia is that they felt like a responsibility to their readers to include an element of optimism, an element
Rachel
of...
Hennessy said that last year. I was just
Yeah.
going to say in an interview when we interviewed her last
Yeah.
year.
About
she
climate
said that.
fiction.
Yeah.
We talk about that a lot about
I've heard it from a bunch of different YA writers, I think, which is why maybe I can't remember the specifics. But I do think that's an interesting difference because I remember reading things like The Handmaid's Tale, things like The Power, like dystopias written for adults. And you get to the end and often, like, for me, the affect as a reader, I feel just so like, well, what's the point then, I guess?
it's
I
very
guess we're just fucked.
Can I say on that subject, that's why the book series Divergence pissed me off so much. I think I was reading that maybe in my early 20s. I can't remember exactly. That time is a blur. But when that last book came out, and spoilers if you haven't read the series, I guess, the protagonist dies at the end. And then the last chapter...
Major spoiler.
The last chapter, the epilogue, is in the point of view from her boyfriend, the love interest. Four, that's right. His name's Four. And I threw the book at the wall. I was so angry because I feel like with young adult or that age dystopian, which is what that was marketed to, there does have to be that optimism.
And I don't think that
She
necessarily
totally broke the rule.
I don't think that necessarily means like a straightforwardly happy ending. Like I genuinely don't think Hunger Games is a happy ending, though I think some people will argue with me on that. But there is a level of like the idea that this structural injustice is something that can be fought.
Yes, exactly.
Which I think you don't necessarily always get in adult dystopias. And I think might actually be why YA dystopia is the thing that took off as a mainstream obsession, because it's just more marketable as a film where you have a protagonist who can overcome an antagonist.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm going to do our run sheet totally out of order because you're making thoughts happen.
That's what happened.
But
I can't remember the order, so that's fine. I won't know the difference.
I was just thinking about how there's such a fascination from adults with that period of life, with teenagers. And I was thinking about all the texts we consume that are about high school, for example. Like so many, whether you're thinking Buffy the Vampire Slayer or Stranger Things, or like you could name so many texts that are about high school.
It's really big in new adult as well. The characters, even though sometimes they are in high school, but it'll be like a boarding school. Sometimes they're in college, and the college kind of operates like a boarding school with uniforms and stuff like that.
There's all the kind of paraphernalia of being at school and of being adolescent. And I was wondering because you were talking about hope and you were talking about kind of optimism, and there I wonder if there's something about that time of life where everything is before you and it's all kind of hopeful.
Or the
even
fantasy
if it's hard.
of doing it better too.
Yeah.
As an adult.
Having a different experience
when
than we all
people
had
say
at
like,
school.
high school's the best time of my life, and you sort of go, huh?
Yeah, that was not my experience.
What? I think there is that fantasy of
I see
what
that's
if
just
I could have done it better.
That's just like bad story structure when you're thinking about like the narrative arc of your life. You shouldn't peak.
That's right. That's right.
Peak at the
You
beginning.
picked too soon.
Gee, kindergarten was really good. Can I go back there?
Oh my god, that's true.
There was finger painting.
Yeah.
It was great. I got a nap in the afternoon.
And chickens.
I also think there's an element though of writers writing for their own teen self though. Like, I mean, this is a book that Harry's mentioned before, but David Levithan's Boy Meets Boy, I think was, especially at the time it was published, very like, what's it called? Like a queer teen fictional character that was that like optimistic and happy was just not really a thing.
Yeah.
And so there's an element of, writing to like, this is the book that I wanted or needed when I was a teenager, or I'm imagining a world for a teen version of me. Yeah.
Yeah, it's almost like we're formed by things that happen to us in the formative years of our life.
Yeah, true.
What?
What? I think you process your teenage years forever, Not that you can't heal or move forward with life and stuff, but like that they always come up, 35, 50 years old, you'll be talking to your friends and be like, oh, I remember this thing that happened in school,
And because your feelings are so big because you're experiencing everything for the first time, there are so many ways that you can bring about catharsis by writing about that experience or that time period.
Like my favorite books to this day are still like YA books that I read, like Tamora Pierce and John Green as well. I remember I had a very unfortunate week where I watched Dead Poets Society, Bridge to Terabithia, and read Looking for Alaska all in the same week. And it was the week after a friend of mine had passed away.
Oh,
Which
Justina.
in some ways it was like a really intense emotional experience, but I just happened to accidentally stumble across 3 texts that are all dealing with grief and youth and how you handle grief as a teenager or a child. And that was like, like these books have a huge impact. It's not that I read them in order to process grief. It's just that I just happened to have an interesting selection.
I actually think a lot of YA is actually quite dark.
Yeah.
Like it does actually grapple with quite heavy themes.
This series by Katie McGarry, I loved... Oh, I just hit the microphone. Soz everyone. I read those when I was a teenager, and they're all romance, but what the characters are going through is really quite dark. Like, the main character of this one, her mum...
What's it called for those listening?
Pushing the Limits by Katie McGarry. Something happened. Her mum is maybe schizophrenic or something like that, and like very traumatic experiences. And the others are all very, very similar. There's abuse, there's going into foster care, all that kind of stuff. And you're so right in your research about romance and optimism and how that can help you process dark content like that, because all of these are romances and they don't get like a super happy everything's going to be okay at the end, but you can see that they have like a reason to persist kind of thing despite
and I think you as a
happened.
reader, you get these little dopamine hits that get you through hard stuff as well.
We, as much as we talk about like how having these things in books can help teens process it, and it definitely does do that, like I think sometimes the conversation can forget that these books are also just entertainment.
I love
Like
that.
they're books that people read for fun, to be entertained.
Because I think that was always something levelled at the novel, was that it was silly, right? Silly books for women and books that will rot your brain, and this kind of feeling like books have to be educative, that their value is, and I think when you bring children and young adults into it, that is just ramped up, right? That it must have moral value in some way or have a teaching element. And so
Andy Griffiths would love to differ like farts and cows and whatever the hell.
But then I was thinking about school as part of that, the context of kids reading in school, and that a lot of the way, like a lot of these books, a lot of authors kind of make a living by utilising schools, right? Like being on school reading lists, or, they used to have the little book where you got to order your books in. Do you remember that? What was it called?
You mean Scholastic Book Fair?
Yeah, the Scholastic Book. Like, and you get the little pamphlet to the school, and you get to tick which ones you wanted to order. That was always very exciting.
Greatest time of the year.
Yeah.
I always wanted a spy kit. I wanted to be a spy.
I feel like you still could be a spy. I wouldn't be surprised if I
Love to
found
be
out
a
one
spy.
day, if there's a memoir one day and you're like actually out there being Jane Bond, I would not be surprised.
I was a spy the whole time.
Yeah.
When I was, I want to say maybe 10 or 11, we were reading a book in class together, and we'd finished whatever book we were reading, and then the teacher asked me and my nerd friend to go pick a book for the class to read because we were known nerds. And so we went and spent a long time in the library.
That is a crushing responsibility. Can you imagine?
Oh, we were so like, we're going to pick... We had such a discussion. We're like, we need to pick a book that's going to convince the rest of these losers that books are cool. And we picked out one of our favorite books at the time, which was called I think it was called The Wind Singer, but I would double check that. I'll find it. And I'll send it to whoever edits this. But we really loved that fantasy book at the moment, which I think was like a fantasy dystopia type thing. And oh man, our whole class found it so boring, and they just wanted to read Truck Dogs.
Devastating.
Which was The Wind Singer by William Nicholson. Yeah. They wanted to read Truck Dogs, which I think was literally just a book about dogs that are trucks, or trucks that are dogs. Not sure which direction they prefer. And I was like, well, we tried.
Great tragedy of nerddom.
Yeah. But it was inconceivable to me at the time that there were people who were not fantasy nerds. So,
Did you guys read a lot of fantasy? I think a lot of YA was fantasy. I read a lot of fantasy and a lot of romance. They used to have, because I'm a lot older than you, they used to have all these different series lines of teen romance. There was the Silhouette romances, and then there were the Sweet Valley Highs. Francine Pascal did a whole bunch.
Oh, cool.
And they were like, they had the most amazing covers. I'll have to dig out my collection one day.
I'm sure I read a single romance book as a teen, not because I avoided them, but because we definitely didn't have that.
Yeah. But the thing about, like, I think, the moral panic is so weird, because I look at my reading, the same time I'd be reading something like that, I might go back and reread like Roald Dahl's The Witches every year, and I might also go back and reread The Magic Faraway Tree, but then be reading really adult stuff.
Yeah.
Like I remember at the same time I would be reading like One Day in the Life of Ivan Denisovich, or I was obsessed with Catcher in the Rye at that period as well. And then like I just raid bookshelves and read everything.
Yeah, like obviously, YA is directed at a certain age, and teen fiction and junior fiction and all the other ones that we named that I can't remember. But those of us who were like voracious readers as kids know, like you just read whatever. You read whatever you picked up. Like I would see a book on a shelf and think, oh, that looks interesting, and I would read it. And I think the thing is that you need to have places for kids to go when they read an adult book and they do come across something that they're like, ooh, that was a bit scary. It's not, you can't just be like, don't read these books.
Oh my God, I picked up
Because that's just going to make kids want to read the books.
I remember being in year 8, and it was 1988, and I was reading Magician by Raymond Feist. So I think I was 12.
That's a big one.
Yeah, and so that was kind of what I was reading. But then someone had left Sidney Sheldon books in our year 8 homeroom. And so I picked them up, and they're intense. I don't know if you've ever read Sidney Sheldon, but he was one of the old kind of bonkbuster kind of books, but written by a man. And there was one that had like snuff films in it, like graphic sex with snuff. And I'm reading like that at 12 as well. Yeah. And it's that thing of like, you do encounter things. It's like, who do you talk to about this?
I was reading like my mum's, so mum loves crime novels. So I was reading like Harlan Coben novels as a teenager. And those are not like, it's not explicitly graphic or anything, but there is murder and violence
Stephen
and
King.
sex.
Read
and
a lot of Stephen
all sorts
King
of
too.
themes. And she had, I can't remember what the author was now, but there was one crime book that I read that scared the shit out of me. And I was like, Mum, this was so scary. And she was like, all right, well, let's talk about it. I was like, oh, it's so scary for this reason, this reason. She was like, okay, well, you know, and whatever. And I processed it, it was fine. And then I went back and read the book a couple of years later. And I was like, nope, that's still scary as shit.
And when I mean, we all did it, right? And when I was in year 8 and 9, it was the height of Flowers in the Attic and Virginia Andrews.
Right.
Everyone's reading those incest books.
Yep.
And it's like, well, we all know kids are out there reading. And now with their Kindles, they're really out there reading.
Yes.
What happened to
But
me?
I do think like
Is that what happened?
Yeah, that's what happened to me. Got an
the other
e-read, it
thing-
was all over.
As a teenager, I was reading fan fiction.
Yeah.
So you don't even have to go and
Yeah.
buy that or borrow
Yeah.
that from the library. There's all sorts
I
of
do
stuff in
think-
fan fiction.
even teenagers will regulate. I do remember being a teenager reading a book, have no memory of what book it was, that immediately I was like, this is just not for me. This is like a level of violence that is just not for me. And then would you believe I could just close the book and put it back? You know?
Yeah, we've talked. Now, that was one of my questions, was how we approach consenting to these books. Because I think adults are very worried about what the kids are reading and what the kids around them are reading. And so this idea of how we consent and what your responsibility is as an adult too around kids and reading.
There were, every now and then, there will be a debate at work. People will argue that we should be putting stickers or asking for ID for certain books, like stopping certain kids from buying things. And I was always really against it, partly because I don't want that responsibility, because if I accept that I have that responsibility, then am I
I think
liable
it kind of
for
sucks
what
to
people
put the responsibility on individual
Yeah.
booksellers too. Like, I think that's a pretty big individual responsibility.
Yeah,
I
like-
don't mind rating systems, actually. We do it for film.
Yeah.
I don't mind a fake, because it doesn't stop you getting the book.
No, it's just an
No.
indicator for
just
you.
know what you're
Again,
getting into.
as
yeah.
with all things, books, social media, the internet, I think it's a parent's responsibility. I
Yeah.
really do.
Yeah, it's
And- yeah.
seriously though, like your kid in town can pop into any bookstore and you wouldn't know what they're buying or what
Yes.
they've got.
Which is why you need to facilitate a relationship of trust with your child, so that when they buy a book, they'll tell you.
Yeah,
And
I
even
mean, I
though-
do accept though that teenagers need privacy and they need to like stretch. I just think the thing about a rating system, which we don't have in Australia, I don't know if anywhere has for books, but
Yeah, not
is
for
it?
books.
It does just give a guide to a nervous child, or to,
Definitely.
you know, it just gives a guide of like, this might be what you're encountering, you know, like when we have MA, strong violence or gore, or
Yeah.
Yeah.
it just kind of gives you a sense of what you're in for, which I don't think is a terrible thing.
And there
Actually-
are movies that are rated R, and that's for a reason.
Yeah.
And somebody, wherever it is, has decided that children should not see that.
And the
at the movie theatre.
paperbacks when I was growing up, those really trashy mass market paperbacks, they told you what you were in for. Do you know, like if you picked up a Stephen King book, it had blood on the cover, and like there were talons or hands coming up out of graves or bodice rippers, or they kind of really said this is adult content. Whereas now I don't think you get that from covers.
That's true. I feel like
yeah.
the covers used to be a rating system in and
Yeah.
of themselves, but they're not really anymore, especially now because YA is so dominant and has kind of eclipsed teen fiction, and publishers are marketing YA books to adults and teenagers. Now adult romance and YA romance looks very, very similar.
Yeah, I think we talked about it last year maybe, but like the fact that Guild is just on a shelf in Big W, not separate from the other books.
But I actually think that like, talking about the covers and stuff, like the cartoon, brightly coloured cartoon covers. I don't know, someone fact check me on this, but I think that was something that started in YA and teen books and became how contemporary romances and rom-coms were marketed. And then now I will sometimes see like, you know, Icebreaker in the YA section, even though I don't think that was ever intended to be marketed as YA. But because it looks indistinguishable from the other contemporary romances in YA.
Yeah, and I think because tone, like covers used to give a tone. So those cartoon covers used to suggest there's going to be more lighthearted, more fun, more. But I don't think that's true anymore. I don't think that is at all true.
I mean, and there's always trends. Like, I mean, YA used to always be about like headless women, you know, like a girl with no head. It used to be into the like photographic covers. Or
the headless girls.
Yeah. Or like, I don't know. There's been a lot of different trends in YA covers.
Yeah.
Each one as delightful as the last.
So on the run sheet, we had a question that I've actually been thinking about all day because I think it's really interesting, which is around this kind of genre expectation is if you lump all of young adult into one genre, even though it's dark, we have these expectations of it because they might not allow a kid to have it on a reading list at school but then be reading a classic that is actually really confronting. What was the one you mentioned before? There was someone mentioned a book before that was read in school.
Read The Crucible in high school.
Yeah.
Was it that one?
Things like To Kill a Mockingbird. And,
that's really common to read in high school.
Yeah.
Or, you know, you're doing Macbeth and Romeo and Juliet.
I can't remember what my kids did, but I know there were some books where I was like, oh, that's quite grown up.
Crazy.
Yeah.
That was the one you mentioned, was the Clockwork Orange, which I think...
Oh, yeah, that's on the a book on the banned list.
Yeah.
One of the most banned books in America.
That maybe because of sexual violence, I kind of understand that, like the extremity of sexual violence. But a classics kind of, there's a little bit more leeway than there is maybe with
which is
like
interesting
young adult.
From memory, the books that we would have read or spoken about that dealt with themes of like class or Romeo and Juliet is often taught as a romance when it's really a criticism.
Can you imagine? I was just thinking about Romeo and Juliet. Can you imagine if you were like a year 9 teacher? Because I did that in year 9. And you rocked up and you went, right, I've got a YA novel I'm going to give the kids this year. It's about like a 13-year-old and a 15-year-old and they hook up. Their parents don't want them together. Yeah. It all goes very wrong. He kills someone and then they both end up dead after having sex underage. They also got married without telling anyone. Like you'd be like, you can't set that text.
Yeah. And they don't talk to you about it in that way. Like you just read it and then you talk about the themes and then that's it.
What are the themes?
A long time since I've done Shakespeare.
I mean, I don't want to get
iambic
distracted by Shakespeare. I remember I
don't want to get distracted by Shakespeare. We need on a t-shirt.
I mean, like
I really need a t-shirt that says that.
I remember I hated studying that in class, and then it wasn't until I was in my 20s and I watched like a production of it that I finally like quote unquote got it.
I cry every time I see a production of it.
When I watched it, I was like, oh, I see now. Like, because it's more about like, at least I don't know. It's not so much about the romance, but about how devastating it is that this like beef between the adults has this like...
It's so stupid.
It's about cycles of violence.
Yeah, literally. It's like your children are inheriting this violence even though they're just trying to have a silly, goofy, fun time, you know?
Yeah, and people often age them up to, like you were saying, 13 and 15, and people age them up in in the ways that they talk about them or in adaptations and stuff. It's like, no, the tragedy is that they were 13. Like, that's the point, is that it's a tragedy.
This leads me to something that I have been wanting to talk about, which is the difference between a story that has, like, teen characters versus a story that is for teens.
Yeah.
And a story that is, like, a coming-of-age novel or narrative for an adult audience versus for a teenaged audience. Because I think sometimes... people will say, oh, this book could be YA because the character is like 14 or something. But it's not like for teenagers.
Yeah.
It is for an adult audience thinking about, I suppose,
And there's a
their
lot
coming
of those.
age.
So there's a lot of adult fiction
Yeah.
that features teens.
Yeah, in the Bona that I'm reading at the moment, I think the main character is 14. He's nuts.
Yeah.
He's a little weirdo, but you feel kind of sad for him. Anyway.
I remember reading a fantasy book, definitely an adult fantasy book that had the main character of that is 14, and it's like, this is not.
Oh, so
for
much
teenagers.
fantasy doesn't
Yeah.
it? Actually, it has the young protagonist who goes on a journey. But even classic literature does that. I mean, you go back to Dickens and it's a lot about the Bildungsroman and starting with them when they're very young and watching them grow up. But they're not kids' books.
Was there that? I remember in high school we watched the movie. I have a feeling it was a book. Is it called The Reader? The movie has Kate Winslet.
Bernard Schlink, The Reader. Yeah, the
Yes.
movies with Kate Winslet.
That's really dark, and he's a kid in that. Yeah.
Such an interesting, problematic book too.
Yeah.
I do think part of that difference is though that people think because when it's in a respectable genre, then this is serious and we're actually being critical and thinking about it. I think romance gets this as well. Whereas if it's dark or difficult content in a disrespected genre, then it's like, well, that's not appropriate. How are people going to handle that? It's
and I think it's your entertainment thing, right?
Yeah.
It's like, oh, you're just reading that to be entertained. When actually I think sometimes when we talk about processing, sometimes in entertainment fiction there's quite a lot of processing going on. And in like more highbrow fiction, sometimes there's a real reveling in violence and sex and stuff without the processing. So it's a really weird idea.
And then you get think about kids' movies. Like kids' movies, so silly, goofy, fun. But you get through those movies. There's a lot of, and it's because they're themes designed in a way to be processed by children. Like The Lion King traumatized a lot of us as kids, but we're okay because we processed it because they're animated lions.
Fox and the Hound.
Oh, Fox and the Hound. Like Treasure Planet is one of the formative movies for, I know, a lot of people, a lot of queer people, a lot of trans people. Treasure Planet's like a formative movie for them. And like that's based on Treasure Island, the book, you know, which I would argue is not a kid's book.
What you were just talking about has reminded me of something that I read about people, I think they were like modernist authors, and it was in this book by Jonathan Greenberg, and he was talking about modernist authors, and he was talking about T.S. Eliot and stuff like that. And I think even Machiavelli, who was saying things like, because they didn't like sentimentalism and they didn't like humanism and they didn't like things like sympathy and that kind of thing. They thought there's like a carnivalesque experience that we have where we're very entertained by seeing people tortured, hurt, in pain, and we shouldn't have to unpack that. It's like a perfect laughter was the term that was quoted in Jonathan Greenberg's thing. And it had me thinking, like, this is really bizarre, but there are examples of things where it does seem like we are just relishing violence, but I don't think it's as, like, psychopathic as they make it sound.
But I think there's a line between real violence and fictional violence, right?
Yeah.
We know it. Like, you know it. Like, if you witness a car crash, you have a trauma response to that, right? Whereas if you're watching a schlocky horror film with quite a lot of gore and violence, you're not processing it in the same way.
And there's a difference, again, then with reading, where especially if it's like a close POV or a first person, you're so much closer to the experience of it in a way. Like, you're still distanced by the fact that you are sitting wherever you're sitting and reading a book. But to me, it feels a bit less sometimes like voyeuristic than even just watching something on film.
Because you have to sit with it.
And you're invited to imagine your way into the event.
Yeah.
But I also wanted to say that I think sometimes people get really, it's like the backhanded compliments about YA, where they're like, oh no, but this YA's actually got good writing. And I was like, what do you mean?
It's
I don't know.
What do you mean by that?
I was thinking
that in
about,
romance. Oh, but this one's actually written well.
I haven't mentioned another one of my favorite YA series that I read as an adult, which is Maggie Stephens' Raven Cycle, which I think she's like such an incredible writer. Her like writing is so beautiful. And it in a way that as a writer sometimes will make me mad when I'm reading it, because I'm just like, who gave you the right to do that to me? But it's also like, yeah, you get this level of like, people think that because the audience is a teen audience, that then like it's a surprise that the books are good, which I'm like, they do that about romance as well. And I was like, please.
I was thinking, I feel complicated mentioning this author, but I remember reading Ender's Game when I was growing up. And obviously, for context, Orson Scott Card has come out and said some awfully homophobic, gross things. So
Conversion therapy, things
yeah,
like that.
like awful. But one thing I found interesting was that he had this YA book that was like a YA school story, and then jumped from that. The sequels are these incredibly dense, adult, philosophical books. It was such a weird jump to go from one to the other. And I was wondering if you can think of any other books where you get that aging up happening.
Yeah, Tamora Pierce actually does that. Her books, I think, are actually often shelved in like middle grade rather than necessarily YA. But I remember reading the Alana books, which is, I think, trying to remember what the first one's called, something like Song of the Lioness, things like that. They're about a girl who cross-dresses to train as a knight, and then it does follow Alana from like childhood through to adulthood, and like she has like adult relationships with other adult characters and teen relationships with other teen characters throughout the series. But it's like, yeah, it's 4 books, and the character is a fully grown adult by the end who is like going to war.
Because I was thinking about Adrian Mole. They do, like, Adrian Mole starts at age 13 and 3/4 or something, 13 and a half. And then she's still writing books about Adrian Mole, like as he's gone into middle age. Like those diaries come out every now and then. It's like watching 7 Up or one of those shows where they revisit someone. Is you had this author invent this really hugely popular YA couple of books, and then he becomes an adult and he's getting married and he's getting divorced and he's like, it's really interesting.
There's a couple of series that did it, certainly ones that I like read over time and read as I was growing up. There is the series that shall not be named, but there's also Percy Jackson is one that I know people grew up with, and they've aged a bit. I don't know if they're complete adults at the end, but also a series of unfortunate events. Like, again, they're not full adults at the end, but we were growing up with them as the books came out. And not the best example, but Twilight, because I was the start of high school, I think, when the first book came out, and then I was in year 10. So it was the year I turned 16, was the year the last book came out. So we were like sharing the book. Everyone was reading it. We were all talking about it. And like, we knew it was not derogatory, but we knew it was trash at the time. Like, we knew what it was, but we still reveled in it because we'd all read it, and we were talking about how much, the things we liked about the last book and the things we hated about the last book. I was
already grown up, and I was in writing groups, and I just remember that book, the widespread appeal. Like, I had a friend who was in her 50s back then, and she was obsessed. Yeah. She had the posters, she had like every bit of Twilight merch. Like, it just hit people.
I remember one of the things that, I loved those books as a teen, and then I did get like irony pilled when everyone started hating on them, and I was like, they're bad actually. But but in the moment when they were coming out, the other thing that was so fun about them was because everyone was reading it, and it was so fun that we were all enjoying the same story together.
Yeah, that's what it was. It was the universal appeal meant that even a couple of friends that like I had that weren't the biggest readers, or friends that read different genres for the most part, we were all reading them, so we could all get together and talk about it. That was what was really special about that.
I always notice people who are still irony pilled now, they misremember the writing, and they talk about the writing being poor quality. And I'd reread it so many times in my life. I stopped counting at 13 rereads.
Peyton has brought her copy today, and it is falling apart.
It's so trash. The other books, because they're so much bigger, I had to like tape them back together and stuff. It's really funny.
Don't you love that though, when you get your familiar book and the cover's soft and the pages are soft, and it just flops back on its hinges because you've bent it so many times?
ASMR. But yeah, like the writing quality isn't that bad. Like, people act like it was written so badly. I'm like, I don't think you've read it at any point in the past, like, 3 years.
Again,
You know,
I
don't
mean,
think you
what is
remember.
the metric here? Like, what is the
Yeah.
metric of
I mean,
quality?
people
I could
love-
say that about pretty much anything that people say is written badly. I'm like, is it actually that bad? What
and
constitutes
what
really
is
bad
well?
writing?
What are we looking for here?
Also,
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, maybe I'm tangenting us again, but that also just makes me think sometimes that, like, people thinking about the writing being bad, like, yes, I'm guilty of doing this exact thing and reading a book being like, this writing is trash. Who told me this was good? But there is quality in the ability to write an entertaining story, right?
story,
Even if
yeah.
you think the sentences aren't the most beautiful, groundbreaking thing, the fact that the writer wrote a story that was so engaging and so entertaining does require, like, skill.
I also feel like, you know, stories hit at moments, and that is such a millennial story, right? Like, it was clearly speaking to a
To Mormon
politics
emos.
of relationships that was so, like, important at that time for people to read.
It
because-
is the Mormonism.
Yeah.
That's the universal
Yeah.
appeal.
But we still talk about it, you know, we're still talking about
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
We still marathon the movies every once in a while, you know, and
Yeah.
in a silly, goofy way, like
And you
haha
still-
Twilight, but also because we like them. We love them. We love to watch
Yeah.
them.
And you still greet your friends by saying, where the hell have you been, Loca?
Exactly. We still ha, 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 all the time.
And I had a final fun question for you, which is, if you had to live in one YA world, which world would you live in? Which one would you be, though? Are you going to be a werewolf? You're going to be a sparkly vampire? Are you being a human?
That's I'm a werewolf person, so I would probably be a werewolf, I guess. But I am not native in any way, so I can't imagine I would be a werewolf person. So I guess I'd be a vampire.
I would be, if I was in Twilight, I would just be at the high school trying to just be friends with Bella and being confused that she was like, no,
Yeah, I'd just be trying to live my life. All these
like,
vampires.
girl, keep away from that family. It's a cult. Anyway.
That's really hard.
Yeah, I should have been thinking about
It
this
is a
question
hard
the whole
question,
time.
yeah.
I'm just
finding
looking
it
at the
hard.
books that I brought
Yeah,
in.
what are-
Like,
what are
I'm
the other
going to have
books
to
that we
limit it
brought?
to one of these because I can't think of
I mean,
every
we kind
other
of
book.
did grow up in Eggshell world.
I could grow up
Yeah,
in
yeah,
Eggshell world.
I couldn't live in Discworld. It's too crazy.
I don't want to live in any dystopian.
No, I'm
Yeah.
steering absolutely clear of dystopias.
Artemis Fowl is pretty great. I would love
Nice.
to be a fairy or a whatever. One of the
Ooh.
the little creatures.
Yeah.
Maybe
being
a
creature
Melissa
would be-
Marr paranormal.
Oh,
Are those way? Maybe those
They
were like
are,
adult
they
paranormal.
are.
Okay, yeah.
I was all about Holly Black when I was a teenager as well. The modern fairy tale, the Tithe, Valiant, Ironside. But I also don't want to be in those books. The fairies in that are
It
very
all seems
dark.
very dangerous.
Like,
it all seems incredibly
The
dangerous.
books I was reading, I was like, most of these are not pleasant places to be.
Yeah.
I would be a tree person from the Raven Cycle.
Oh my gosh, incredible.
Yeah,
That's a good one.
that seems
Yeah.
nice, like a nice life.
I would
Let's all be
probably
tree
get
people.
killed by the demon if I was in the Raven Cycle.
Otherwise, maybe I would be in Fallen because it was just so gritty. Lauren Kate, Fallen Angels, Fallen Angels, gritty.
Oh
Yeah,
my god,
pretty dangerous.
we have to
Yeah.
stop the episode, but we didn't even talk about the Mortal Instruments.
Oh my
Oh, okay.
Formative. Talk about
yeah.
They had a gay character.
Groundbreaking. I loved those books as a teen as
I
well.
love those
did.
books.
If it was controversial to say,
I
you say it,
recently-
but I loved them.
I recently rescued those books from my donate pile because I've had a box of books to donate for ages, and then I was rummaging through them, and then I was like, I can't donate these.
No.
So why is it controversial?
It's written, well,
There are a few
they're
things.
considered trashy a little bit. It's a little
Yeah.
bit Twilight,
Yeah.
like in that same vein of Twilight.
Really?
But also they're written by Cassandra Clare, who very famously has a big plagiarism mark on her.
Ah,
I don't know
right.
that
'cause
it's
she wrote-
very famous. I think that is very famous among
Sorry,
people who are in
famously
fan fiction
on the
spaces.
internet in fandom spaces. She wrote Harry Potter fan fiction back in the day. You can look at this all of
Okay.
this
Yeah,
up on
yeah.
the internet. But basically, big plagiarism scam, and apparently she's not a very nice person.
I mean, a lot of that I feel like what's the word? Like allegations of things she did when she was a fan fiction writer that I think have just people have kept at the forefront of, I guess, online spaces, people's understanding. But about her not being very nice. I'm so, like, I don't think this is controversial. I really don't care whether the authors of the books I like are nice.
I think we have to be really careful about that.
Amy's a horrible person.
I am. I'm a really cheeky horrible. A lot of people hate me.
Yeah, my favourite authors could be, like, so mean and nasty. And
But
I would
as
be
an
like,
author, I know I'm on a
"Love
podcast, like, putting my face out there, but you kind of don't want people to think about you when they read the book.
Yeah.
I want complete strangers to buy the book, not knowing who I am and just enjoying the book as its own thing.
Yeah.
Well, as it turns out, there's 3 Mortal Instruments fans right here on this podcast, and we don't care. We love those
Deal with that.
You do you.
I will
and
live
be
in the
as
shadow
mean
hunt
as
as
you
well.
want.
Yeah.
Hell yeah.
I just feel like if I was in any of these worlds where there's like a mix between the like regular people and the special magical people, I'm gonna be in the regular people side. Like, there's no way I'll be in the secret magic powers side.
What,
Like-
do you not want to be, or do you feel like
No,
think you
I just
are.
don't think I would be. I think I would be at home.
No, you
Like,
totally
I would be like
would.
reading a
Wait
book
a
or
minute,
watching
because
TV.
in the books, it's always the nerds who are the secret magic people. We
Yeah.
are totally the secret
Okay.
magic people.
Sometimes.
This has reminded me
It's
of
not the
another
football
YA
players
book. I
and the
think
cheerleaders,
it's
except for
Well,
Buffy.
Shadowhunters is a little bit like they're all pumped full of angel blood and stuff. but
Yeah, that's true.
I guess you would be born that way. The point is that you would
I mean,
be
I am
born that way, so
Catholic, we
you
do
would
drink
be
blood.
cool and magical and whatever.
Patrick Ness's book, The Rest of Us Just Live Here,
Oh,
is
yeah,
about, yeah.
I love
the
that book too.
normies. Yeah. There's like
normies.
all this crap going on in the background, and they're just like,
I actually think
do they like
Do
me?
people
It's
like
more likely
fake
I would
their
have
angel
secret-
blood?
Pardon?
If it's like a caste system, can you fake it?
No, because you have to be able to do.
Can
the
you
magic
blood dope?
runes on
Can you
yourself.
blood dope? Like cyclists, we could blood dope and all be
No,
angel
'cause they
blood
don't have,
people.
You can
like,
turn
the-
anything into drugs.
Look, a lot of things happen in those books,
and
but they
that's
don't,
what I
like,
learned
have-
from YA fiction.
You can get drugs anywhere. You can snort.
Just
angel
say
blood.
no, kids. Just say no.
Like, from huffing permanent markers, you get permanent marker powers.
Oh hell yeah! Whiteboard powers.
You just leave a trail of ink everywhere you go.
I think I would have secret powers and then just never realize, because I am the kind of person who would just not notice things.
You would just constantly refuse the hero's call.
yeah. But without knowing that
No,
I was receiving one call.
Justina would probably accept it but forget to do it.
Yeah.
The world ends. I'm like,
Oh, God.
That's right. Dang it.
I was wondering what that reminder was.
oh, that's what this cursed
No,
amulet was
no,
for.
wait. That's next Wednesday. The world is ending next Wednesday. I've got time.
What a good note to end the podcast on.
Thanks for joining us. So next week, come join us. We're going to be actually talking with Olivia, who is the author of our book of the month, Eggshell. And we're going to be talking about our favourite YA. We kind of dipped into that a bit today. But everyone's going to bring a curated little list of their favourite YA. And we'll talk about what we loved and why. And see if, 7 Up, that documentary where they got a bunch of 7-year-olds in the 50s and then they revisited them every 7 years. It's based on that old line, show me a person by the time they're 7 and I'll show you. It was man. Show me a boy by the time he's 7, I'll show you the man. And it's this idea that it's formative, and we'll see if your reading has actually formed you into who you are today. Which one of you is an angel? I really
We're
want
all
to know.
vampires, yeah.
Anyway, so if you love YA, join us again next week, and we'll be talking our faves.
Woohoo. Thank
Bye.
you. Bye.
Amy And is hosted by Amy Matthews, Abby Guy, Peyton Hogan, Justina Ashman, Harry Stewart, and Lily Heffernan. This podcast is recorded on Gardenland with music by Anthony Wigmore and Mass Wisteria. Our logos and branding are designed by Abby Guy. This episode was edited by Millie Heffernan.